An old man, scruffily dressed and adorned with a woolen hat, yells blue murder as the bathtub he sat in careers down a steep hill in the Yorkshire village of Holmfirth. Campo, played by the late Bill Owen, was the star character in Last of the Summer Wine, the world's longest-running sitcom, which made its debut on BBC television 50 years ago this month. I remember sitting on a wall in Holmfirth, waiting for a scene to start with the sun blazing on my face and thinking, it's not a bad job to be doing at our age, and getting paid. So recalls Brian Murphy, who played Alvin the Milkman in the latter seasons of the show, which ran from 1973 until 2010. It could boast more than 20 million viewers at its peak. I do remember the start of the show vividly because I was doing Man About the House at Thames, recalls Brian, now 90. We watched it and we all said, not bad, but not my cup of tea. It didn't get high praise from any of us. We all thought it would run for a couple of seasons. Then 30 years later, I was in it. The melding of the Yorkshire countryside, and three irascible pensioners determined to grow old disgracefully was an instant hit, firstly on BBC Two for 3 series, then on BBC One. As the writer Roy Clark, who penned all 294 episodes and would go on to create Open All Hours and Keeping Up Appearances, said about the show's inception, Duncan Wood, who was the head of comedy at the BBC, told me they wanted something with 3 old men. I tossed it about for months and nearly said I couldn't do it. That was until I realized these men could be free and easy with no family or work commitments. Then they were in the exact same position as kids on the other end of the age scale. In the society of half a century ago, where old people were expected to quietly retire to their living rooms, Last of the Summer Wine was a reminder that a childish sense of adventure was still possible, no matter how advanced the years. The original trio was the anarchic Campo, retired lino salesman Cleggie, played by Peter Sallis for the show's entire 37-year run, and Michael Bates as pompous windbag Blaymeyer. It was amended in 1975 when Brian Wilde, later to be Mr. Barraclough in Porridge, replaced Bates as Foggy Dewhurst. It was a blessed release for the makers of the program, who often had to stop Bill Owen and Bates from bickering in between takes. Bates's right-wing politics and Owen's staunch Labour Party values made for friction between the cast that was only resolved when Bates left due to ill health. The classic lineup of Foggy, Campo and Cleggie were joined by infamous battle axe Nora Batty, a matriarch so popular with the British public that I Love NB car stickers, in the style of the iconic I Love NY logo, were a common sight on cars in the UK in the early 1980s. It was a triumph for character actor Kathy Staff, whose wrinkled stockings won a TV ratings war in Christmas 1981 when 17 million people tuned in for the Summer Wine Festive Special. That was 4 million more than watched the first showing on UK television of Gone with the Wind. Even the Queen Mother became a fan of the show, according to Prince Edward. Cleggie, Foggy and Campo performed a sketch in front of her at the 1984 Royal Variety performance. It had great appeal abroad, remembers Brian, who joined the cast in 2003. The Americans loved it. The scenery was beautifully filmed as well. The background is just as important as what's going on in the foreground sometimes. Time, however, took its inevitable toll on the original characters, with Sallis being the only member of the trio still alive when the show ended in 2010. In its autumn years, Last of the Summer Wine became something of a retirement home for British character actors, with Thor Hurd, Bert Kwok, Frank Thornton, Russ Abbott, Norman Wisdom and even John Cleese making appearances. More than 20 years since his last regular sitcom starring role in George and Mildred, Brian sailed into his debut episode on a hang glider, presuming he had landed in France, and asking Salas and co if anyone in Holmfirth could speak English. Bill Owen had died around the time I started, so I said to the director at the time, "I'm not Bill," says Brian. "I really wanted my character to have his own identity. There's a side to everyone on the show that's a bit mad and I wanted Alvin to be different. He would wind up Nora batty rather than pursue her romantically, like Campo did. I was forever falling off walls or into the water with the stunts. I remember saying to the crew, 'You do realize I'm an old-age pensioner?' To which the director Alan J.W. Bell pointed at Peter Salas and said, 'Well, you're not as old as him.' I said, 'But if you keep having me falling off walls then I'm never going to get as old as him.'" The 31st season of the show was its last in 2010, with the program having long since won the crown of the world's longest-running sitcom. Today, 13 years after the final episode, Holmfirth still attracts Campo and Nora fans to the wrinkled stocking tea room in the village. An exhibition of props from the show is on display inside Campo's on-screen home, which includes his go-kart and infamous white long johns. The BBC has no plans to revive the show with a new generation of pensioners and, while the mournful Ronnie Hazelhurst theme song is still instantly recognizable, Brian believes it simply wouldn't be possible to remake the magic of the program now. The writer Roy Clark is now gone and I don't think there's any appetite among bosses to make a program that has the lightness of Touch of Summer Wine, says Brian, who is now retired but said he would be tempted to do a day or two's work if the right offer came his way. "Everything these days always seems to have to be knife edge or cutting edge. I always think that translates as be insulting," Brian concludes. There was none of that in Last of the Summer Wine. It was the last of its kind really, a show that could be watched by all the family in one room. I think there's a magic to that.